A warm greeting to you all. My name is Paul Skorpen, and I'm a teacher of spirituality and a teacher of healing, and I also work as a healer. And I do that because I had the very good fortune to spend 6 very intensive years with one of the greatest teachers and healers of our time, Stylianos Ziteshlis. His name was Daskalos, known as Daskalos. And since his passing in 1995, I've been living in Germany, teaching spirituality along with my wife, Birgit, and also teaching in Scandinavia and other places. And I'm going to give a talk now, which I gave in German a couple days ago, called The Invention of the Subconsciousness. The title is provocative, I realize that, but because of the fortune I've had to lead trips into our ancestral lands of Anatolia and Egypt and go deeply into some of these extinct belief systems of the old Egyptians and the old Greeks and the Romans, I've made some discoveries about consciousness, which tend to be reconfirmed every time I make a trip. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that we were told by Daskalos that we are 90% subconscious. Sometimes he even said 95. We're told by the Buddha the same thing. We're told by the psychologists like Freud, Sigmund Freud, and C.G. Jung that we are divided into parts. Freud described them as the id, the ego, and the superego. Jung was a little bit more open-minded and talked about how we have part of us is the personal consciousness and part of us is the collective consciousness. It doesn't matter, but all of these teachers, even if you talk about the spirit and the soul and the body, you basically divide consciousness into different levels. In spirituality, East and West, we talk about energy centers which run through the body. The 7 primary chakras, pretty much everybody knows about them. The root chakra, sacral chakra, solar plexus, heart chakra, throat chakra, third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. And each one of these chakras are connected with a dimension. And so, here's a question for you folks listening or watching. Daskalos situated the seat of the subconsciousness in the solar plexus. And even scientists call the solar plexus the second brain. There's a famous book published about 30 years ago by Michael Gershom of Columbia University called The Second Brain. And if this subconsciousness is situated in the solar plexus and we're 90% subconscious, then 90% of our consciousness is in the solar plexus, which means that leaves 10% of our consciousness to be divided among the root chakra, sacral chakra, heart chakra, throat chakra, third eye, and crown chakra. And funny enough, for us, it's no problem that a great teacher or teachers tell us that we're subconscious. We take that for granted. We think that might be the universal condition of humanity. That from the very beginning of time we were 95% subconscious, that we're not an exception now. And I'm going to try to prove otherwise. What do I mean by that? Well, It is us in every given era. It is us who decides how we define and how we program our 7 chakras. That's one thing that is in our hands, like the software system in a computer. We decide how we're going to define and then experience our 7 chakras. And so if we go around and say we're 95% subconscious, and we all believe that, because the psychologists and psychiatrists and the mystics and the spiritual teachers are all telling us the same thing, then what's the relationship to the 7 chakras? As I said, then you're going to have 90% of your subconsciousness, 90% of your personality is going to be situated in the solar plexus and be subconscious or unconscious. How have we reached that point? In other words, why do I call this talk the invention of the subconsciousness when the subconsciousness was not invented? And the reason is because the way we've developed the subconsciousness over the last 2,000 years is, first of all, very unique and very painful. So, if you're born into the Judaic Christian tradition, or if you decide to become a Buddhist or were born a Buddhist, or a Hindu, then the Hindus tell you that this world is Maya, illusion, and the Buddhists tell you this is samsara, and don't be attached to anything here because you'll only suffer. In Christianity and in Judaism and in Islam, we believe that there was an original garden, a paradise, and for whatever reason we were expelled from this paradise because of a woman, Eva, who ate the forbidden fruit and then gave it to Adam, and he ate it. And then, boom, we were outside of the Garden of Eden, and the first 3 emotions that we had, and we have until this day, are fear. Adam and Eve had fear to no end. And shame. They had to hide their genitalia with fig leaves. And they had guilt. And some people call this guilt and this shame and this fear the original fear and the original shame and the original guilt, which plagues us in the Judaic Christian tradition. And so it is taught for the last 2,000, 2,500 years or longer that we're here punished on this earth and in this body. And Daskalus used to go around saying every week that the body is a prison, that the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. And a lot of us who have been involved in the churches, the Catholic, Orthodox, or Protestant churches, are used to this idea that Christ died for our sins. So we're doubly guilty. We're guilty because Christ died for our sins, and we're guilty because we were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And now, if we look closely at the development of the early church, and it doesn't take much to do this, you know that Christ lived and walked on this earth in the Holy Land for about 33 years. And if you read the Gospel of John, or if you're lucky enough to read the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary Magdalena, then you see that Christ treated women at the same level as he treated men, with complete equality. And you also see that he had a very special relationship with one woman called Maria Magdalena. And we also know that all the priests in the early church until year 400 were married and had children. And why was that? Because it is a Jewish tradition that rabbis marry and have children because God has children. As a matter of fact, if you go on YouTube and you search The Secrets of the Bible by William Dever, you'll see that the Jews, shortly before the time of Christ, most of them believed that Jehovah, God, was married to a woman named Ashara. They find in the houses of the Jews these small statues of a woman holding a child, Ashara. And so we had some balance there in early Judaism, or late Judaism, early Judaism. We had some balance in Christianity when Jesus was around. But then, as we know, the early Christians were persecuted. Some of them had to leave the Holy Land. Some of them went to Ephesus, like John and the Mother Maria, and maybe Maria Magdalena. Some went to the Provence, Lazarus, and maybe Maria Magdalena. Big mystery there. And we know that the early Christian church was in danger because of this persecution until Constantine declared that the Roman Empire would no longer persecute Christians. He didn't make it the state religion, that came later. And so in this relative safety that the Christians had, they said, wow, now we want to build a church. We want to be different than our Jewish grandparents, even though we're Jews. And so we want to build a church, and to build a church you need to have a book. And this is about year 240. There was no Bible, there was no New Testament. Even the Old Testament didn't exist before 100 years before Christ. And so some people offered their services to select books, Gospels, to compose the New Testament. And if you're a student of the Bible, the New Testament, you know that the Bible is built up out of 27 books, beginning with Matthew and ending with the book of Revelation. At the time that the New Testament was compiled, there were maybe over 100 books about Christ and about his teachings and about his behavior. And they became forbidden to read. They were banned. You would even be subject to death if you read some of these books. And they were buried and burned. And because of Nag Hammadi, this place in Egypt where they found many of them in 1944, and because of some books appearing in the souk in Cairo, like the Maria Magdalena Gospel, we have them again. And it's my passion or my dharma to make from these films movies in the German language. Thomas Evangelium, Thomas Gospel was my first movie about 3 years ago, and now recently finished as the Gospel from Maria Magdalena. So, in a sense, you have to ask ourselves, like Robert Frost asked in his book about the mending wall, when I build a wall, I want to know what I'm building in and what I'm blocking out. And if you throw away 75% of the books describing Jesus, then you better have a pretty good explanation why you did that. And it's clear it has to do with the fact that the architects of the early church, they shared something in common, and it's called misogyny, the hatred of the feminine. And they decided, maybe with a good heart, that it'd be better if the feminine didn't have any part in the development of the New Testament, because if they do, then we have Maria Magdalena, and we want the church to be built up by men, because men are logical, men like rules, and men can obey the rules. Not saying anything about women directly. And so they didn't want the women to have any part in the church services. They can attend. And then as we know, Christianity became the state religion, and I think in year 390 or something like that. And then it spread to Rome, and it spread from Rome to Europe slowly. And we had the split with the Orthodox Church, with the Catholic Church, and then with Martin Luther we had the split between the Catholic Church and the newly founded Protestant churches, not too long ago. And you can say pretty safely that Europe and Scandinavia and Russia and America later were built up to a very large extent by the contents of the New Testament. They were basically Christian nations. Even America, even though it's secular, all the founding fathers were Christians. And they were versed in the Bible, especially Thomas Jefferson. And now, here's the point. If you build up a church based on the repression of the divine feminine, then what you're going to automatically favor is the upper chakras. You don't call them chakras, but you favor thoughts, you favor principles, you favor dogmatism, you favor rules and regulations. And that finds a good home in the upper chakras, in the crown chakra, especially in the third eye, and the throat chakra. And then if you do that and you slowly say that sexuality is forbidden for the priest, as a matter of fact, you say sexuality is something beastly, and it's dirty, and it belongs to our lower nature. And then you even go further and you say emotions don't have anything to do with spirituality. And the body and the flesh is against spirituality because it comes always into temptation and it leads us astray. Then what happens is slowly you have a deep division in the chakra system, a massive division, where the lower chakras start to become separated from the upper chakras. And the upper chakras define the lower chakras because they want to control and manipulate the lower chakras. And they define them as unholy. And in the middle of this division, you have the heart chakra, right here. 3 chakras below, 3 chakras above. And that continues over the centuries. It becomes installed as an institution. You build up thousands of churches in the name of Jesus Christ. And this message becomes entrenched in the society. And then slowly you build up an economy, and that's built up with this belief system. And you elect capitalism because it fits well to that. And then you build up a school system built up with this belief systems built up largely from the New Testament, favoring the left hemisphere of the brain over the right hemisphere of the brain. And then you build up the nuclear family, where the woman is subjugated for hundreds of years by a dominant male. And then you build up modern politics, both domestic politics and then international politics. And now here's the thing. As this develops then, as the Judeo-Christian traditions develop, then the the percentage of our subconscious becomes greater and greater and greater and greater and greater. Because once you have this division, then so much of your desires, which are forbidden and taboo, and your sexuality, which you have shame for, it goes deeply into the subconsciousness, and not a good subconsciousness, because it goes into pain, it goes into fear, it goes into anxiety. And then you have, later, as a result of all of this development, you have the Crusades with the explosion of anti-Semitism. And then a war between religions, which is going on to this day, between the three children of Abraham. And then, boom, then you have the witch hunts, starting in the 1400s, going all the way into the 1700s in America, starting in Europe, of course, in Austria. What's Austria today? Just a massacre of the divine feminine. And then this division in the chakra becomes so extreme, and we call it the subconsciousness, and it's no wonder that Sigmund Freud in Vienna in the late 1800s and 1900s said, because he saw what people were going through. They were a mess. And he saw that they had an id. And he saw that they had an ego which was trying to control the id, and then a superego which was trying to control both of them. And he saw how tormented people were sexually, in relationship to their parents, and to each other, and to themselves. And then the beloved Daskalos, a man who was in the Christ consciousness, said to us every day, "You're 90% subconscious. 95, actually," he said most days. And we say, yeah, we know. Because we know that we're built up out of a childhood, which is family karma. We know, if you believe in past lives, we're built out of personal karma. And we know, thank God, that there's a third karma, which is collective karma, which Daskalos didn't even know about. And that's why he had the stroke in the left hemisphere of the brain, to make peace with the body and to make peace with the earth. And you can only do that back then by shutting off the left hemisphere of the brain and living only through the right hemisphere of the brain, which sees the world as a present and the body as a gift. And so, as a healer and as a teacher, I earn my daily bread from the subconsciousness. People come to me for treatments. They come and attend these talks. They come and attend my seminars. They go with me on trips to Anatolia, to Egypt, to Patmos, to the Holy Land, because they love spirituality and because they're suffering. Because the subconsciousness has become a monster in some ways. There's so many dimensions to it. Some of them we know about and some we don't know about. And from that I earn my living. I have a number of psychologists and psychiatrists, psychotherapists, who I love deeply, and they earn their money from that. They earn their money from people suffering, because the subconsciousness has become so enormous and ungangly and unmanageable. And then if you think about it, medicine and the pharmaceutical industry, they earn a ton of money from the subconsciousness, because when the subconsciousness becomes so complicated and so disturbed, then that takes, especially filled with fear and guilt and shame, and that starts consuming all of the vitality in our body, then we'll be sick, either emotionally or physically or both. And then we need medicine, and we need radiation therapy, and we need chemotherapy, and we need this, and we need that. And it's an industry. Capitalism, and I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist, but capitalism earns a ton of money off of suffering because it sells us products every day that's supposed to relieve our suffering. And the church, the organized church and spirituality, church and Buddhism, and the teachers of Buddhism and the teachers of spirituality, they earn a ton of money and respect because they tell you about how much you're suffering and how guilty you are. Either because you're guilty because of the original sin or Christ, or you're guilty because you have so much damn karma and you believe it. I'm sorry when I'm so emotional about this, but I gave the talk a couple of days ago, and I haven't recovered from the talk I gave a couple of days ago. But I knew I had to give this talk now, and I don't know who's going to watch it, and I hope you understand what I'm talking about, because I adore Daskalos. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the patience to have me by his side for 6 years and to teach me privately, endlessly, for 6 years, because he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And I'm not speaking against Daskalos. He's right when he says we're 95% subconscious. And now I want to ask a question. Is that normal? We know it's not healthy, but is it normal? And now I go back to where I began. Okay, so over the last few years, I've been leading trips, seminar trips to our ancestral grounds. The last trip was just recently to Anatolia, all the way, starting in Göbekli Tepe, a temple which is 12,800 years old, not far from the Syrian border, built by people we have no idea who they were and why they built it and what it means. And I led a couple of trips now to Egypt, from Cairo all the way down to Aswan. And we know that Jesus was a boy in Cairo. And we know that all through the Holy Land, there were Greek and Roman temples built for Aphrodite, for Artemis, for Apollo. It's a secret, they don't want to talk about it, but they're there. Even in Patmos, the church, the great church of John, was built out of the remains of an Artemis temple, which they tore down to build a church for John. Just like the Artemis temple in Ephesus was torn down to build a basilica in the name of John and a mosque. Building blocks, Lego blocks. But in my research or in these travels, I noticed something extraordinary. Because in doing that, I've also gone deeply into their teachings of the Greeks, the Hellenic Greeks, especially Artemis. And I've gone deeply into the teachings of the old Egyptians, the Enea, the 9 gods, and other gods like Sekhmet and Hathor and all these wonderful, wonderful gods which we call paganism, and we dismiss it because we are monotheists, and we're modern. But if you look at the Greek system and the Roman system and the Egypt system, which coexisted with Judaism and coexisted with Christianity for the first few hundred years, you see something extraordinary. First of all, you see that in their family tree, they had all a perfect balance between female gods, goddesses, and male gods. 50% male, 50% females, until the highest level. How about that? That means that everybody who incarnated in Egypt or in Anatolia or in the Greek Isles back then, and if you were a man or a woman, you were equal because you had a mother or representatives in heaven. And then think about that, what that means to the chakras. The gods were making love with each other. They were having children. Sexuality was totally healthy. It was godly. It was divine. And not only that, the Egyptian belief system and the Roman and the Greek belief system believed that in the beginning there was chaos, not a garden. And there's nothing more chaotic than the Big Bang. Big Bang. Maybe they knew something about the Big Bang, because the Big Bang was pretty chaotic. When you take a ball of energy the size of a golf ball and you create everything, that's pretty amazing. Chaos. So the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, their gods were there to protect us from chaos. So we would serve them with sacrifices or with prayers, and they would serve us. It was very dynamic. And they were here with us on earth and in heaven. So there was no difference between heaven and earth, or very little difference. And even the Hellenic Greek folks, they made no distinction between the many sciences. Philosophy was at one with spirituality or religion. Astronomy was at one. Astrology was at one. Philosophy, they were all one. They had a big exchange with each other. Even the great Paracelsus from the island of Samos, went to study for 10 years with the priests in Luxor. One of the great mathematicians came back to Samos. And so here's my question now. If this was the case with the Romans and the Egyptians and the Greeks, then how did they experience their 7 chakras? And the answer is self-evident. They made no distinction between the upper chakras and the lower chakras. No need to. And not only that, because they were so integrated, we call them primitive, and I understand why we do, but because they were so integrated, because their belief system was integrated, they had very little, if any, subconsciousnesses. Because they didn't have to fight against their emotions. They had no fear. They had no guilt. They had no shame. And sexuality was healthy. They were integrated. Meaning their heart chakras were open. And not only that, they had immense joy. Good, they had wars with each other, they defeated each other, they took each other's land. But for great periods of time, they had joy. Music and art and wine and celebration and devotion. And I'm not romanticizing this. I know this is a fact. You just have to read their text and how they related to their gods. That their gods for them were living, and they cared for us and we cared for them. And then with the advent of Christianity, which was built up, the original Christians, in order to defeat the Greek and the Roman belief system, not to mention the Egyptian belief system, had to use terrible violence, and I mean terrible violence, against these belief system in order to have any place. Because essentially Christianity was a provincial religion. It was based around the Sea of Galilee and Jerusalem. And it was based on love. And the early Christians couldn't be loving, because if they were loving, they couldn't establish a church. And they did that in Ephesus. The big victory they managed to achieve was in Ephesus, in the Marine church in the old city of Ephesus, built in the name of Maria 200 years after she died. They held a council of Ephesus in 421, and they said, we can't defeat Artemis. They love her they love her endlessly. What are we going to do? And somebody said, why don't we take this simple woman, the Virgin Mary, the Jungfrau Maria, and why don't we make her the Mother of God, Theotoka? And when we do that, she replaces Artemis, and she gives birth to Jesus, of course, and Jesus is then a god. And we know the Greeks and the Romans, they love gods, and so that they had a foothold. They had a foothold, and Christianity took off then and became very strange. And that's when the priests could no longer be married, and they had to be celibate. And then in the year 600, Pope Gregory, bless his soul, called Maria Magdalena the prostitute. And the church in 1969 didn't apologize for this, but they said there's no biblical evidence for that, so you can forget about it. So, I have another question to pose. I'm sitting in front of you right now as a personality. My name is Paul. I'm told by Daedalus I have 3 bodies. The mental body, noetic body, emotional body, and physical body. So already I'm divided. I have a soul, I have a spirit, and I have a personality. I'm even more developed. My left and right hemispheres of the brains have very little connection with each of them, because I'm a product of a school system which didn't value the right hemisphere of the brain. My 7 chakras are divided because, not only because of Daedalus, I mean Daedalus didn't do that, but he definitely confirmed it, but because for the last 2,000 years I've been a devoted Catholic. I won't go any further into that. Some of you know me. And I believed in all of that. I believed in all of that. I believed so much that even the women didn't belong in our spiritual institutions. They're too spontaneous. They're too horizontal. Spirituality is vertical. Let's go away from this world. So as a personality, I had a father and a mother, bless their souls. Both highly educated people from Yale University. Both philosophers and very good people. But I can tell you one thing, they believed too that they were subconscious, and they lived life largely subconsciously. You can function well. And they were both children of my grandparents. On my father's side, Norwegian, and on my mother's side, American, Scottish, German. And my great-grandparents, I never got to know them, were probably very subconscious, especially during the time of the Industrial Revolution. And building up nations and economies and politics and ideals and dreams. So I'm a product of 2, and they're a product of 4, and they're a product of 8, and my great-grandparents were a product of 16 people. Or also, you add 16 to that, and then you add 32, and then you add 64, and then you add 128, and then you add 256, and then you have 512, and you're only back about maybe 150 years, 200 years. And we know that our DNA is programmed over time. And how? It is absolutely programmed. My DNA is programmed over time. And my DNA is formed from thousands of people. Thousands of people going back to the time of Christ. Physically, my DNA. And I believe that from these thousands, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people, that probably 99% of them were subconscious because of illness, because of wars, because of hard times, because people have very short lifespans, and life was good, but it was also a lot of suffering. especially before the advent of modern dentistry or penicillin. And so my DNA is telling me I'm subconscious, and I follow my DNA. And then my teachers are telling me I'm subconsciousness. The psychologists and psychiatrists are telling me I'm subconsciousness. I'm subconscious. Do I have to stay that way? Do I have to stay that way, especially when I know that during the time of Christ in Egypt and in Anatolia, in Asia Minor, all through the Greek island, they were probably not that subconscious at all? Even so, I would even go so far to saying that if you incarnated in Egypt at the time of Christ, or shortly before, or if you incarnated in the Greek Hellenic time, you were probably, we can turn it on its head, you were probably 90% conscious and maybe 10% subconscious. Now how about that? I'm sitting here today, 2,000 years later, in a modern society, in a monotheistic belief system, and I'm less conscious as those folk. And I know I am. I can think better, maybe, and I'm more critical and I'm more analytical because I was trained in the universities to be a philosopher and a sociologist. I was trained in Kathmandu by Rinpoches, and then I was trained by one of the greatest mystics of our times. And so I begged the question, it doesn't matter what your DNA is telling you. You're not that subconscious. You're not. And forget everything that everybody's telling you. And go into integration. You can free your DNA. Your DNA can be reprogrammed. Your cells can be reprogrammed. Your entire body, physically, emotionally, and mentally, can be reprogrammed to be fully integrated. Because not too long ago, if you believe in reincarnation, you were. And you spent many, many lives in the last 10,000 years much more integrated than you are now. So, close your eyes now. Gently close your eyes. We know that there are original forces pulsating throughout eternity. These original forces are, if you believe in what Christ taught, the greatest of these is love. But love alone is not enough. So we are a child of another original force, and that's a masculine force, the original father energy, paternal energy, paternal. I call it the logos, or light. And you're a child of a creative force, the feminine force, which I call the eros. And each one of us is a child of these three forces. So I want you to imagine over your crown chakra a ball of energy which is love. Maybe you see it in rosy light, a ball of energy. The original power of love forms a ball of energy of love over your crown chakra. It's there. You can feel it. You can feel the vibration of it. It's a blessing. And now over your right hemisphere of the brain, I want you to invite the Eros craft, the eternal mother craft, to build the Eros energy, the eternal mother power, force, to build up a ball of energy, maybe in the white color, with her beautiful blessing and life-giving energy. And she does this. And now over the left hemisphere of the brain, I want you to call on the divine masculine force, the eternal Father force, the Logos, to build up a ball of energy over the left hemisphere of the brain, maybe in gold or yellow color. And he does this. And now I want you to invite through your right hemisphere of the brain the divine feminine to flow through your right hemisphere, cross over your third eye, and flow gently down the left side of your body, into the left shoulder, the left lung, the spleen, down into the left testicle or fallopian tube. And bring that in now. Bring that energy in, and with your out breath, let go of any of the disturbances that the divine feminine frees from you. Breathe her in, maybe through the nose when you can do that. And let go of that out breath through the mouth and see all these blockages, all these disturbances going away. And slowly you'll feel the whole left side of your body fill up with the divine feminine force. And now come into connection with this divine masculine force, this golden yellow sun over the left hemisphere of the brain. And now breathe that in through the left hemisphere of the brain that crosses over the third eye and starts to flow gently down through the right shoulder, through the right lung, through the liver, through the gallbladder, gently into the right testicle or the right fallopian tube in the women that are watching. And again, you breathe that energy in then through the nose when you can do it. And release this breath now through the mouth and see all the blockages going away from the lungs, from the liver, from the gallbladder, from the testicle and so on, and it goes away. And gently the Divine Father takes his place in you. And now it's like you have the Divine Father holding you with his wing, holding the right side of your body, and the Divine Mother holding the left side of your body. And now invite the rosy sun, the love energy now, to flow through the crown chakra, into the third eye. Again, breathing that in as it flows down, and breathing out then anything that's freed from the third eye or the crown chakra. Into the throat chakra. Gently into the heart chakra. Into the solar plexus. Into the sacral chakra. And into the root chakra. And now, with the love flowing through your spinal column and through all 7 chakras, lay your left hand on your root chakra, invite the Holy Feminine together with the right hand, and invite the Holy Masculine, that these 3 forces come together and fill the root chakra now with this immense blessing. And then bring the hands up to the sacral chakra and ask them to do this. And as we do this, as we invite the divine masculine and feminine love into the 7 chakras, we ask them now, also at the same time, to clean our DNA from centuries, even millennium of division. To go deeply into our DNA throughout our entire body and to clean ourselves from division. And bring our hands up over the solar plexus now. Let the Divine Mother and Divine Father flow into the solar plexus, and then do a deeper cleaning of the DNA and the solar plexus now. And the nerves, all the nerves in the abdomen. And it's like you feel the subconsciousness becoming full with light. Full with light and joy. Filled with light and joy. Now bring your hands on the heart chakra. Let these 3 forces become one in your heart chakras. And let the fear and sadness and life fatigue flow away from your heart chakra. And then lay your hands gently around your throat, God, really softly, and allow these forces to flow into your throat chakra. And at the same time, continue to clean the DNA in the cells from destruction and suffering. And to move your hands around your third eye, just gently over the sides of your head and your temples. To clean the third eye of all these ideas that no longer function, they no longer apply. Even a lot of spiritual ideas. And to fill it with love and light and life. And then, again, at the end, we bring our hands together over the head, maybe turned upwards. When it's comfortable. When it's not comfortable, just do it with your intention. And allow these forces to flow gently into the crown chakra. The love, the Divine Father and Divine Mother. And these 3 forces now bring all 7 chakras together in harmony. Clean the DNA. And as a result, you'll feel your heart chakras begin to open. Open maybe even more than they've been open in the last 2,000 years. And it will stay open. And you'll find yourself living more time in love and forgiveness. And not only that, you'll find yourself experiencing waves of joy. Even the original joy. Life joy. And you'll probably also experience a deep thankfulness emerging in you. Gratitude, gratefulness for the wonderful gifts we have of the 2 hemispheres of the brain, the 7 chakras, the 5 sense organs, these wonderful limbs that we've been given to walk around and to move around this beautiful earth. And also these arms and these hands that we have to create, to love, and to heal, among other things. And I have an invitation, a request for you all, from my heart. After this talk, I want you to take a major step. And this step is that I want you to go through the next day with the belief that you're 90% conscious, awake, aware, and 10% subconscious, unconscious. And allow yourselves to believe that. And allow your DNA to be freed from anything that speaks against that. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. If any of you in North America, Canada, South America, or my old home ground, the United States of America, are interested in learning healing, then I've been invited to teach my healing education in California, not far from Los Angeles. And I'll be there in February of 2020 to actually teach 3 courses. The first course will be a 2.5-day course on the Lord's Prayer as a way to God consciousness, theosis, and also as a healing technique, self-healing and healing technique. It's a mini course. And then the weekend after, you can check my page, I'll start teaching Healing 1 over 4 days, based on Daskalos, what Daskalos taught me and what he taught us all. And you'll learn in these 4 days a complete healing technique which help people to come into the state of integration. And if you have time and money and you want to stay on for the second 4 days, which is then an 8-day retreat, then it's well worth your time, if I may say so myself, because you'll learn a healing technique which I've been blessed with from the Apostle John, which has to do with 7 treatments over the course of 6-7 months, which allows the Divine Mercy to go deeply into your chakras, deeply into your DNA and your cells, and bring you into a new time of integration. It's a wonderful technique, and I often say that healing's the opposite of work, because healing's like meditation. I would be glad to spend time with you there and teach you this technique, and with the hopes that you can take this technique and also then help many, many other people come into a state of integration and freedom and joy. Thank you, and may God bless you. May the gods bless you.